Okay, so here's our lineup. I showed you the picture of the suspect at the beginning of the class. Now, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, 4, 5, and 6 there. So take a close-up look at these faces. Now, if you email me the number of the suspect and you get the right number, I'm going to give you a full letter grade bonus in the class. Now, the suspect is up there. You have to pick one of them. There's no other slides. It's one of these 6 guys. I mean, I know who it is. To me, it's pretty obvious. Now, the guy's hair has changed a little bit, but you probably have an inkling as to who it might actually be. Okay, so pause the tape if you need to. Pick one of these guys. Email me for a full letter grade bonus. All right. Did you do it? Did you pick one? Well, first off, I'm not giving you a letter grade bonus. Second of all, the suspect isn't even in here. I'm just trying to force you into making a choice. I bet you some of you actually picked one of these guys. And that's just a glimpse as to some of the problematic procedures that are used in lineup procedures. So police might ask witnesses poorly constructed questions upon discovering the crime. They might allow one eyewitness to hear the responses of another eyewitness. So you have 2 people like talking to each other about the crime. That is interference with their memory. It might take bad notes, and this says and note recording, but that should say and not recording the questions that they asked. And interviewing the suspects, we have a theory of how memory works, so we can interview someone with a proper theory of memory. Police officers might not do that. And they might also use investigators that have no training in interrogation. So what can we do? Well, when we actually have somebody that's an eyewitness to a crime, we can slow down the rate of questioning. We don't need to get them to make statements about the identification of the individual right away. We've got time. You know, that TV show, The First 48, makes it seem like you have to have the information now. Well, that might lead to false convictions. So if we just slow down a little bit, that might be good. We can recreate the original context of the crime. So kind of take people back into the original context of the crime and try and get them to remember details of the crime like that. We can tailor the questions to individual witnesses. So make the interview witness-centered versus interviewer-centered. Like, just because I have a list of questions that I have on my sheet doesn't mean that's how the interview should go. We should be a little more flexible and have it be witness-centered. And be sensitive to incorrect versus correct responses. And informing premature conclusions. Now, if you're an officer that's investigating the case, you might have premature conclusions. How do you think that would color the way that you interpret the rest of the information? So I think we should actually get rid of lineups. I think that it's a bad idea. Now, there's lots of other procedures that we could do, but I don't think that we need to do live lineups. One, there should probably be legal counsel there, like an attorney. That's a little annoying. 2, it causes a lot of anxiety for the victim of the crime or the eyewitness of the crime. And there's time constraints. It's not portable. You can't like take a lineup with you. Although oftentimes police will arrest a suspect, put him in the back of a car, drive them to the crime scene, and show the victims the guy in the back of the police car, and they'll say, "Is that him?" And they'll say yes. And then they later do a lineup. One thing you can't do is control One thing you can't do is control the suspect's behavior. So how do you know if somebody's going to act like an idiot in the lineup? You don't. And it's kind of a one-shot deal. The other issue is the foils. Those are the people that you put into the lineup. How do you get foils that look close enough to the suspect? Do you pull them out of general population in the jail? That's frequently done. What do you do if the suspect identifies one of the foils as a perpetrator? This is problematic. We should get rid of this. Another thing is that police will often imply that the suspect is in the lineup, just like I did with those 6 guys. That's a bad idea because it forces a witness to make an identification. If it's one of those 6 individuals, well, I gotta pick one of them. And that's not how we want people in our society identifying suspects. They might pressure witnesses to make very clear choices. They might ask witnesses questions regarding a specific subject only, like, I mean, look at this guy. I mean, this is a guy right here. Maybe it's not that blatant, but you know what I mean. They might encourage a loose recognition threshold by saying stuff like, does anyone look familiar? You know, one of these guys has got to look familiar to you. Anybody up here look like the individual that committed the crime? Sometimes police officers will leak hunches, like, oh, you know, I'm pretty sure it was the guy all the way to the left. Or, the worst thing that they can do is after an eyewitness identifies someone, tell them that they made the right choice. Because in subsequent identification procedures, that person's going to be pretty certain about their choice. So what should we do? Well, if we can't get rid of lineups altogether, we can change the procedures that are used. I like the idea of using photo books, but not the way that it's traditionally done. So one thing that we can do is a double-blind procedure. So the person who conducts the lineup or photo spread should not be aware of who the suspect is. So if we use a blind procedure like that, the person that's conducting the lineup doesn't know who the suspect is. That would help, and it would prevent the administrator of the lineup from inadvertently providing information regarding their knowledge of who the suspect is. If we look at this, we've got these 5 individuals. What if the suspect was a black male? We got one black male, can't really tell his ethnicity. This is a white guy. This guy looks Hispanic, and so does that guy. What about this? Now, a lot of these guys, an individual that perpetrated the crime here might be a black male with cross-eye, his eyes are crossed, something like that. I don't know. These individuals are kind of funny looking. But is there anything on there, if you look closely, is there anything on there that might identify one of these suspects as the perpetrator of the crime? Something as simple as an arrow has been present in a lot of photo lineups. Circles, an individual might have one color photo amongst the number of black and white photos. It might be a driver's license photo with photos of individuals that are already incarcerated, like with the height lines behind them. There's lots of different things that actually happen. So 2, the eyewitness should be told explicitly that the perpetrator might not be in the lineup or the photo spread. And if we tell them that, then the eyewitness won't feel pressure that they have to make an identification. They should also be told that the person administering the lineup doesn't know who the suspect is. 3, a suspect should not stand out in any way, shape, or form. Nothing that's going to draw attention to them. 4, a clear statement should be taken at the time of the identification prior to any feedback. So if we have a clear statement and nobody gives any feedback about his or her confidence that the person identified as the actual culprit, that information that we elicit is more reliable. 5. Lineups and photo spreads are more accurate when done sequentially. Now this is important. This will find its way onto the final. What does sequential versus simultaneous mean? Well, in a standard lineup or photo mug book, the individuals are shown simultaneously. They're all together. You got a bunch of them. So we got 6 guys lined up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or the photo spread with all those different photos. When you do that, research shows that this tends to lead eyewitnesses to choose a lineup member based on relative judgment, like who looks the most like the perpetrator, instead of basing the identification on their mental image of who the perpetrator is. But it would be so easy to do. All we'd say is, number 1, and the guy comes in, stands there, and he leaves. We say, number 2, 2 comes in, stands there, and leaves. We could have 20 people in line to do this. It'd be a lot easier if we could just do it with photographs. So we just show somebody a photograph, one at a time, at a time, at a time. So this is just a schematic of how typical lineups are conducted. Now in most jurisdictions, it's this up here. So you'll have a simultaneous lineup, and you'll have a non-blind administrator. And that would be an officer who has an idea who the suspect is. Most lineups in the United States are conducted in this manner. And they have been forever and ever and ever. What I am suggesting, and what the research shows, is that to reduce errors, it is so simple. All we do is switch to this. A sequential lineup where people come in one at a time with a blinded administrator. So these jurisdictions, as of last year, are the only jurisdictions that have implemented a sequential double-blind as standard procedure for lineups. Not too many of them. I guess you're good to go if you live in Minneapolis, which is in Hennepin County, or Boston, or the state of New Jersey, or a couple other cities around the country. Hardly anybody does this. And it would be so easy to do, and it reduces error, and it could prevent so many problems, because mistaken eyewitness testimony can have catastrophic consequences. In Florida, we've had a number of individuals that have been released from death row based on analysis of DNA evidence. And of those individuals, mistaken eyewitness testimony is the leading factor in their wrongful conviction. Okay, so that's the end of that. This is a fascinating chapter. Hopefully now all of you are terrified that you will be mistakenly identified in committing a crime, and that can have some serious consequences. All we have to do is advocate for changing procedures within different police departments, and hopefully they'll do this. But also, as a forensic psychologist, you have the ability to go into a courtroom and educate jurors about the factors that might influence eyewitness testimony, or you could write an amicus brief. You could also train police officers in these techniques of how to administer lineups in a way that reduces error.